Every once in a while on the Grow Limitless podcast, we get one of those guests that just sort of blows your mind. Today's speaker is Jeff Newton. He came aboard as an alumni of the Marketopia program, someone that accomplished the highest close ratio ever with a Marketopia client with a 68% close ratio. And the way he did it is really inspiring. He leverages EQ, process, and personal responsibility and discipline to overcome every challenge before him. If you're running up against roadblocks on the path to success, enjoy this podcast. Jeff's going to help you achieve your dreams. Jeff Newton, a guy that will live in Marketopia infamy. He is a living legend, and I'm honored to welcome to the Grow Limitless podcast. Thanks for coming aboard, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. Happy to be back in your world. Happy to be here.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. You know, for those of you that have been around the Marketopia community long enough, you will fondly remember the chapter at which really Jeff came in as a student and ended as a professor. He made incredible strides and achieved incredible things as a salesperson. But what I'm most proud of and honestly impressed by, Jeff, is how you evolved and parlayed the success you had into making a difference in the community, genuinely helping people overcome head trash, barriers to success, and just, I guess, help people down their journey toward where you wanted them to be, which is where they were trying to go, right? And I just wanted to thank you for that, man. It was awesome to watch. Honestly, we still talk about it to this day, and so I'm excited today to really learn from you and learn about you and see if we can kind of institutionalize some of that wisdom so that we can help hundreds of thousands, maybe millions or even billions of Optimus robots and humans that will consume this training for years to come. So, Jeff, why don't you kick us off, man? Tell us a bit about you, and kind of how you got to, what happened before Marketopia. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so the quickest way to talk through my journey on the MSP side was 18 years, 5 MSPs, 7 times. The first decade was on the tech side. Did a little bit of that account management VCIO stuff in the middle before jumping fully over to sales and marketing, and really living on the growth side for the second decade, basically. How I got into it was it paid the bills, right? It was my first job out of college. I worked for the tech bench at Best Buy before it turned into the Geek Squad, right? So like I loved computers. I didn't want to sell them. I didn't want to fix them, but I enjoyed messing around on them essentially. Best Buy paid for college. And so like a subsequent natural move was this person said, hey, come work for me. You're smart with computers. I'm like, okay, you're a what? An MS what? An MS who? And I thought I was pretty smart. Walked in on that first day. He set 4 laptops down on the desk. He said, okay, we're going to join these to the domain and get them out with the nurses. It was for a hospice clinic. I'm like, we're going to join them to a what? A domain, right? My world was shattered because I was at like the top of the work, I don't know, the consumer side of IT, right? Before I then was really just pulled into the corporate side, if you will. And the other way that I'd like to describe the rest of my journey, like all of those changes, there was 11 different titles I held across that, arc as well. And I was always given opportunities that I didn't deserve at the time, but the people that offered them to me knew that I was capable of becoming the person that I needed to be successful in that seat. And it was just that, like one brick in front of the other the whole time. So, how I showed up in the Marketopia community, as you mentioned, like a student, that's just how I approached everything. I had, a thirst and a hunger to learn. And also, like, failure wasn't an option. So there's like these 2 mental archetypes. Again, I came up on the tech side, so I dealt with them all the time. They usually look at the world through this lens of like, here are the 100 reasons why this won't work. And enough like trying to figure out like, how do I solve these problems that I didn't go to school for? I don't know how to do this crap, but like I knew the people part. So I would lean into like the smartest techs in the room to help me get through the technical stuff. And I did that through asking those people one question, which is, how can I make this work? And that was like the first sign of magic. When you ask here's the 100 reasons why it won't work people, well, how can I make it work? You get a brilliant answer. it's just like the way that mindset is built. And that's just like probably the absolute Cliff Note version of everything that happened there. But yeah, that's really where I ended up rolling into the Marketopia community. So maybe a little bit more context. Let's maybe do the couple of years prior. Let's just talk about the sales and the growth side. So I ran sales and growth for about 8 years between two of those MSPs. The one prior to when I became a Marketopian, I'd actually considered going to Marketopia at the time. We had an in-house marketing team of 3 ladies. They did a phenomenal job of driving inbound traffic. I ran the sales team. I was a sales rep, and then I ran the sales team. So I had a team of 7, and I mastered like the sales process to produce results through inbound driven growth. And then all of a sudden that marketing team left, right? I don't know, 3 months, like all 3 were gone. I'm like, oh shit, that's going to be a problem, right? I was getting maybe 6 leads a month just out of that team. And it was enough to hit, we averaged about 150 grand in net new MRR a year there. And I thought I had everything knocked down, like, figured out. And then I got recruited to go build growth for another MSP. They had smaller goals than where I was, but bigger goals for who they were. They wanted 50% growth year over year to their MRR, 3 years in a row. That was the edict that was given to me. I'm like, sure, no problem. Because that number was smaller than the 150 I was putting up at the other place.
Yeah.
The big difference, though, was they didn't have a marketing team. They didn't even have a GL account for sales or marketing, right? So like no dollars, no cents, no nothing except for referral traditional growth had been there. But I still wasn't afraid of the numbers because the numbers they're easy. Like it is math and it is science. There's some art to it, but it really is just input, output. And I had this sales process that was producing like 63% win rate, but that was all on the inbound side. Well, I was looking to rebuild that marketing team, right? So it was comparing, do we rebuild this in-house or do we go to Marketopia? The midnight decision was to rebuild it in-house. I'm like, F that. That's when I went to the other location. Okay, great. Well, when I got charged with that, I'm like, well, I already know the solution. I've already vetted Marketopia. I wanted to bring them in at the other MSP. So I just called the sales rep at that time and was like, hey, I'm in a new shirt. I'm the same guy. I have the same challenge. Like, put a deal together for me. I need a caller. I think it was like the Mach 4 plan at the time, right? Just kind of went all in with a 3-year commitment on what I knew I needed to be successful to hit the numbers that I needed to hit, which was all about producing not in that case the inbound, but like I needed enough opportunities and at-bats to then just run the system. And that is what really brought me to Marketopia was, okay, if that's the goal, then as long as you produce those leads for me, there is absolutely fundamentally no way that I cannot hit my goal. Like I just knew enough about myself and knew enough about the opportunity and the system that we'd already built where it was just like, just give me the leads, man. Just give me the leads and we'll run it through.
That's amazing. So, man, I want to really dig into that because I love how simple you make the input output concept sound. But first, start off with, man, I see a lot of techs that become salespeople. It's not uncommon, but it is extremely uncommon to hear a non-owner salesperson make the jump. I feel like MSP business owners tend to learn business through the course of running a business, so the transition isn't as hard. How did you learn what you needed to learn to make that pivot without having exposure to P&L and balance sheet and just the trials and tribulations of running a business? Did someone teach you, or did you go to a class, or is it just in you?
Yeah, it is just in me, but I never knew it to be true, right? So I was at the 3rd MSP that I worked for twice, so that's where the whole 5 and 7 thing came from. The CEO of that company pulled me aside one time and he said, Jeff, this is after they recruited me back. He's like, you are my favorite and my least favorite employee. Well, what the hell, man? Like, come on, right? And he's like, well, let me tell you why. It's like, it is insanely frustrating to have an entrepreneur trapped inside my business, right? And he's like, you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur trapped inside my company. I'm like, well, I just see problems and I'm here to solve them, right? And I don't really care so much about titles or hierarchy or any of that. It's just like, I see the thing, I find the way, I build the system, and then we just go, and like, it just makes sense to me. But that was a great perspective to get about halfway through that 18 years was like, okay, now I understand. Well, at that time, I'd probably been on leadership teams, to answer your question. I was a part of leadership teams for probably 15 of those 18 years.
Okay.
And again, I had no business being on a leadership team for probably the first 10 of those, but I was 24 years old. I was basically I was the guy that went out and jumped on grenades, right? Like a field administrator that went and dealt with all the exploding scenarios. And they handed me all 27 people and said, you're the network operations manager, you're running the show now, right? That's the story that pretty much every MSP has too. But I was 24 and I couldn't even manage myself. And now I'm responsible for 27 people. Like that was my first cut at having to understand and figure out the numbers, the business, the metrics that make the whole thing go around and why and how it works. And doing so with like no baseline, which having that student of the game mentality is huge. But also I think I didn't come into any part of it, no role, no company, nothing, with any preconceived notions and no expectations. And that I think set me up for more success than I ever realized too, because I wasn't fighting my own guardrails. It was literally just like gloves off. We have to get to the answers and we're just going to fail as quick and as often as we can until we get it right.
I love that. And it's easier to say than do.
Yeah.
How do you, the fear of failure, I think, drives a lot of people to make bad decisions.
Absolutely.
They've maybe tried something, it didn't work, and they're afraid to try it again, or it's something they just don't understand. They're not comfortable with it, so they don't feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
How did you overcome those tendencies? Considering you started off as a tech, how did you, I guess, get rid of that head trash and push it out of the way so you can start solving problems?
Yeah. I found myself in a lot of terrible situations, right? And that's the truth of it. I mean, there's no like I came out the womb brilliant. It's none of that. It's like I just knew. Well, one, I knew I was not the smartest tech in the room. Two, I could not pass a technical certification to save my life or get a promotion. I just can't do it. My brain does not work that way. And so I had to be resourceful. And by being resourceful, I relied on the things that I did know and I did have. And in my college, I went to school. I have a criminal justice major with political science and psychology minors, right? And why not be an MSP for 20 years? And the thing, though, that I took from that is the psychology. Some of the sociology, but that crap doesn't matter. It's just people, right? So, like, psychology is everything. It's just people. And once you sort of realize that people are also, in some ways, and people may hate this, but, like, there are archetypes. People are like computers. It's just inputs, outputs, especially when you understand psychology, because there's, like, archetypes and all of those things. And, like, when I know how you think, when I know how you take in information and also communicate information, when I also know what's important to you and what you value, it's really about communication. And that is like the psychology piece. And so to anchor that back to how did it all work, I was a guy that was in positions, again, that I was like unqualified for, but I could outwork it. No one was going to outwork me, period. And I wore the same badge of honor every MSP does, where 80-hour work weeks were perfectly fine by like Thursday morning, right? And thinking that was great until I just had to figure out if I actually stopped to ask for help, then those 80-hour weeks would be 35-hour weeks, because I wouldn't have grinded so hard on the things that I didn't have any business grinding on. And that's the people part. I had to figure out how to crack the code of talking to engineers and get them to want to help me. You know how challenging that is?
Believe me, I do.
Yeah.
What's your secret? What'd you learn?
I think there was an element of humility, but honestly, it was like reading the recipe of the individual. Back to psychology. Like, once I understood how you were wired, I knew what I could say to you. I knew how I could talk to you. I knew I could show up and be a human with you to like unlock the human side of that engineer on the inside to make them want to help me. Because the whole goal wasn't like, hey, fix this for me. Here's another dead cat. Let me throw it over your fence. It was show me, teach me. I want to learn. I don't want you to tell me twice. Like, but you really had to approach it through this lens of like them understanding that investing that time in you was going to compound in a beneficial way for them. You know, in some ways, I think maybe depending on what your intentions are, people could label that as just like, I was a really good manipulator, but it really wasn't that. It's just, to me, that's like the essence of humanity and communication, is like really connecting at a human to human level. And I got really good at that because I had to. It was a survival technique. And, you know, fast forward to when I switched sides of the aisle, and maybe even the in between. Like I said, I was an account manager / VCIO. Roughly 10 years ago was when that transition was happening, kind of when VCIO was a first thing even in the market, name-wise or title-wise. And all that really meant was you were a technical enough individual that could actually sit in front of business people and have business conversations and like hold your own in a room. That's all it was. And to me, that was the same thing. It's just like, well, people are people. You put your pants on the same way I do, unless you change legs or something, right? But it's just all the same thing. And because I have that like broken lens of not seeing hierarchy, not being intimidated by anyone in a room, I'll walk into a room. That's fine. It really just came down to, looking at the micro expressions and understanding, where are you? What are you thinking? Why are you thinking it? And I want you to think this. So like, let's just move towards those goals.
You use the word manipulation and then you talk about people and you talk about emotions and understanding what drives them. And I think there's a lot to that in terms of what separates some from achieving their goals, in the sense that high EQ people don't tend to get into the IT space as much as more technically capable or some might say IQ type people.
Yeah.
How did you are those skills, I guess, that your educational foundation gave you? And are there any, if I'm a tech that says, you know what, he's onto something here. I want to figure out how to evolve and develop my EQ so that I can start reading emotions and manipulating people into doing what I want them to do.
Right.
Is there a cheat sheet there? Is there a book or a video or a YouTube or a TED Talk?
There probably is, and if it comes to me, I will blurt it out of turn even. But I would say you hit something important, which is true. It was my educational path. It was also just my childhood path.
Okay.
It was baked in. It was cloaked survival instincts, right? So, from a school perspective, I started off in a Montessori school. Nothing wrong with Montessori. It worked for me, but it worked for me because I was forced to figure out the people part and manipulate my teachers because I avoided the work. I didn't want to. I didn't understand school, didn't hate it. I'm not dyslexic, but I felt like it just in like an educational environment, and everything was hard. Like I still don't know my times tables because of those fundamental years that I just like didn't learn them. But I figured out how to work my contract as Montessori schools went to like do these other things and just sort of get through and get by grade school. And then middle school and high school, I was in traditional education, but it was the same thing. Like, okay, well now I don't have a foundational baseline to be set up for success. And so it was a lot of just constantly having to figure out who do I need to see and target in this room to help get me through the situation I'm in. And then that turned into my career path too. And I'm careful with the word manipulate, but it is a dual-edged sword, and I do think that it just comes down to what are your intentions and what's your integrity like. But it's a very fine line. You're using the same principles of psychology and people and understanding. It's just to what degree and for what interest are you using it in a certain way.
I don't think, manipulate I think has a negative connotation to it, but I don't consider it necessarily negative at all. At the end of the day, your doctor needs to manipulate you so you start doing what it takes to get healthy. Your trainer has to manipulate your behavior so that you start losing weight or accomplishing your fitness goals.
Yeah.
As a salesperson, you're trying to help them at the end of the day secure their business and achieve their goals. As your manager, you're manipulating someone to overcome barriers between them and success. I mean, you could use it for good or evil, but manipulation is the core skill of a great salesperson at the end of the day. And I think having that skill probably enables you to do it for evil or good. The difference is good people use it for good and evil people use it for evil.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yep.
But that's interesting. That's interesting. And I've had some talks with some people in my inner circle about the word manipulation, because I think it's a incredibly powerful skill. I mean, if you look at successful politicians, successful professionals, they're good salespeople, man. They're selling their ideas. They're getting people bought in. They're, at the end of the day, they're just manipulating people in a positive way. So I think it's an interesting perspective there.
If I had to distill down the essence of what sales really became for me, it was nothing more than transferring conviction. That's it. Now, you had to figure out, what is that person compelled by? What are they motivated by? What do they want? What's the outcome? How are they measuring success? Because it's different than mine. Every one of them was different. one of the easiest ways to figure that out was once I got in their office with a whiteboard on a wall, without them without them expecting it, that's a pattern interrupt, was to stand up and grab the whiteboard marker and hand it to them and ask the CEO to write, what are the top 3 initiatives of the company right now? Like, I don't know, if you're an EOS shop, like, give me your rocks. What is actually going on here? And like, what are you currently trying to achieve? And every business would be able to answer those questions, even if you weren't talking to the CEO. Or an office manager is going to know what's expected of them. It's kind of the same thing. Hey, if the CEO walked in this room right now and wrote 3 things on that whiteboard, what are they going to be? It's what they care about. Great. Okay, well, now I know exactly where the organization is aligned and what they are, where their momentum is going. And then it was just a matter of, okay, I can align to that. That was the best part about selling IT services, is like, it's the Swiss Army knife. It can be anything to anyone, which is also what makes it so freaking hard to sell if you don't maybe have, all of the really experience. Because again, I didn't walk into this knowing how to do it. I just got really good at failing really fast and figuring out what didn't work until I got to what did.
I love that. So to me, the path to achievement involves potholes of failure. And the difference, but everyone fails. Yeah. Everybody fails. The difference between dreamers and achievers are the ones that overcome the temptation to then let that failure become fear that you can't overcome and keep doing what it takes to achieve your goal, right? None of us are omnipotent. None of us are so lucky that we make nothing but great decisions, right?
Yeah.
Right. I want to really, if I'm a salesperson watching this, I see someone who not only overcame their own things, but they also convinced the manager to kind of get bought in and to give them what they needed to be successful. And you mentioned different approaches to lead gen. You mentioned different things, but how did your salesmanship relate, and how did you employ those skills to get what you needed to be successful? Because obviously you were successful everywhere you were in service and sales, at least based on what I know. How did you get your manager to be bought in, to give you that support? If you're talking to a salesperson right now and their manager is resisting, talking about failure, unwilling to give the salesperson the fundamental input to their desired output, which is leads, how do you get them to overcome those temptations as a salesperson?
Yeah. Really uncomfortable conversations, but a willingness to have them, right? And ultimately what those boiled down to was challenging their level of commitment to the expectation, right? So when I came back, when I made that change from MSP to MSP, and then I became a Marketopia customer, I challenged the 3 owners of that MSP at the time, which I became an owner there as well. But I challenged the 3 of them of like, how committed are you to the expectations and the goals that you're actually placing, right? Like, and by commitment, it's not just like, well, of course we want to do it, because otherwise why wouldn't we say we want to do it? Like, everyone says that. That's not what I'm talking about commitment. It's the time, talent, treasure piece, right? So time, how much time are you going to give me? Because you don't know what you're doing in regards to building this, which is why you're asking me to do it. And like, from a time perspective, I said, we will not have a conversation about expenses for 12 months. If we're going to execute this agreement, I will not have a conversation with you about where we are with the numbers or anything else for 12 months. Why? It takes 6 to 9 to get there. I don't want to have the overreaction that happens inside, and I saw it, whether it was sales, marketing, tools, stack, anything. There was a month-to-month, like, visceral, physiological reaction in MSPs, which was so ridiculous, because then you're constantly, like, chasing the wake of change and never actually getting to where you were trying to go. So like, that was my first, maybe 15 years at the time when I made that change. Like, I'm not going to deal with the oscillation of, that's a really tough check to cut. Where's it at? Where's the numbers? Where's the MRR? Where's that? It's like, did you or did you not want me to build the system that was going to predictably create revenue for you? If so, I need this amount of space to do it. That was a test of commitment and time. The talent was one, what I brought to the table, but also the team that I built and the team that I had. I didn't just like gut everyone and rebuild. I kept, in fact, in that place, I had everyone. I kept them, just rebuild them. And then the treasure was, are you going to commit the $300,000 or whatever it was, $350,000 over that 3-year goal time frame to actually get the outcome that you're asking for, which was the most important of all the commitments. The other ones are very important, but like the resources was the thing, because it makes everything else futile if you don't have the inputs and the byproduct of what you're trying to accomplish, which to me, that was the leads ultimately, right? The meetings that we needed. So it comes down to being willing and able to challenge the commitment, but you have to challenge in a tactful way, and you have to do it respectfully. It's not like you just come in because your ego's huge. That's not the way to do it. So don't take that from this conversation. But I also had a, long history at this point of demonstrated results too. And so to a certain extent, like being a quota carrying individual and exceeding quota is a great way to like gain the clout you need to challenge things like that. And so I was fortunate in that I got to have that conversation before I became the employee to build it, right? But like I knew what was necessary before I said yes, because I wasn't going to put myself in a position that I'd already been in multiple times before.
When we launched, it's a lot easier to sell when commitment is day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, week to week, month to month.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did really early on was to help overcome that oscillation that you mentioned before by having a contract, and telling people, you have to be committed. If you're not committed, don't try. If you're not going to see it through to the end, don't start, because all you're going to do is waste money until things start to work, and they will start to work. But you have to be patient, yet determined and disciplined, and all of that.
Yeah.
In today's society, it feels like everybody wants no commitment.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like it's a disservice to give people what they want, because you're setting everybody else up for failure. If you're only committed to the salesperson on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, then you're not going to give that salesperson the runway to get where they're trying to go. If you're not going to give the lead generator or the marketer the same runway, they're never going to give the next person in the chain the runway necessary. So in these days where everyone wants no commitments and all of that, how does a vendor set up an MSP for success, knowing these natural temptations? How do you get people to instill discipline as a vendor? I guess I'm curious.
Yeah, it's interesting, a couple of the keywords you had there, because it does come down to discipline, and I think there's probably an element of even fortitude. There's something even more, maybe not important, but more prevalent that I've also witnessed, which is just to put it plainly, like people are allergic to work, right? Like people want what they want, but that's also why I challenge commitment. Like you want the outcome, you want the dream, but you're unwilling to go through the shit you got to go through to get there. And that is the journey. That is the thing. One of my very first people that I read a ton on when I went into sales was Brian Tracy, like one of the OGs of selling. And he's got the book Eat the Frog. And basically it talks about that concept anyway, where it's like the thing that you're avoiding is the very first thing you do it, and you do it in the morning, and then you just reverse engineer your day every day that way. And as a result, you're going to get so much further and farther and faster than anyone else, because everyone else is not going to eat the frog, right? They're unwilling to do the work or do the things that are necessary to actually get there. And the thing that sales taught me really fast, and it taught me fast because it humbled me really, really fast on my very first appointment when I was a sales rep, after I was a VCIO as the closer for 3 years. So I went from being like perceived as whatever, right? I was the ringer. You brought me in and I just did those things, but I was really just me. Well, I misunderstood sales altogether, because I only participated at that little sliver, the little moment when I was on stage, right? In the meetings and talking to people. I didn't have to do any of the other stuff because the reps did all that. Then I became a rep, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like sales isn't just going to the golf course for 90 hours out of the week and then like asking me to come close something for you. It's all these other things that I used to not ever even one notice or two chastise you for, but like it was a lot of that, and none of that is pleasant either. And that was one of the first things I would do when I would get in conversations with other MSPs and challenge them on like, well, how committed are you truly to sales or growth anyway? You say you want to grow, but like give me your to-do list, right? Just do a time audit and then give it to me in a list. And guess where every single send this proposal, follow up with this proposal, reach out to this person, create the quote, generate the contract, all those were always at the bottom. Every sales function and activity was always at the bottom of this list. I'm like, okay, well, that goes back to eat the frog. You're never going to do the things that you actually have to get done to move the needle forward and like get the deal done. And like that was just commonplace. And so like to say it simply, it's like you've got to do the work. And I fell victim to that even when I started with Marketopia. I'm like, shit, they're going to give me, with one caller, I was at like 8 leads or something like that a month, right? They're going to give me 8 leads a month. Like I'm going to have the MRR fairy is going to sprinkle my P&L exactly where I needed to go. That's the way I came into it. Because why not, right? I already had confidence in the sales process. I just needed those leads. The issue is that my whole sales process, all of my experience was still built on inbound leads, not outbound leads, not customers that were at the very top of the awareness funnel. Like there was so much there. I like to call it, I had a great sales system that was like the interstate. And when I first bolted Marketopia onto it, I didn't have an on-ramp. The whole thing was broken. It didn't work. I didn't blame Marketopia for that. I realized, oh, shit. The way that I've been doing it is not the same as the way that this works. I need to figure this out. And so I spent the first 4 months, I think, of the relationship taking every lead and every opportunity and leaning into the caller, leaning into the support staff, leaning into everyone, like becoming a student of the game and figuring out exactly what was going on, the psychology of the people I was working with, and then building the front end of the system to deal with leads that were in that position. The top of funnel, the stuff that no MSP is used to because it's not the people that you're talking to usually, because MSP sales is an event-driven process. What do I mean by that? There's like 1 of 5 reasons someone's actually going to sign a contract and make the move, right? They're going to have some sort of catastrophe, some sort of security events. Their internal guy is going to leave. Their favorite person at their outsourced person is going to leave, or some other magical fifth thing. But it's basically that. And all of that work that gets avoided is the stuff that actually gets you that seat at the table when one of those 5 things happens, right? So the other like big learning I had once I figured out the front end was there's 2 tracks that I measured as it related to sales. And I'll never forget, you had even said it when I shared it with the group one time, was like the first person that you had seen really bring like an engineering mindset to building and running sales as far as the metrics went. Because of the way that my analytical and logical brain worked, it's the only way I knew how to build it. And it was then the inputs that produced the outputs. But the thing that really became obvious was, as we got further into the relationship, was that I then became aware of this second wave of events, where it was like, if we didn't stay on top of these leads for basically 14 months, then we would never get the opportunity to have it hit and close just like that about around 18. And so, like, yes, we did have some that closed early, right? 3-month, 4-month sales cycle, something along those lines. Like that was pretty normal, 90-day sales cycle. But then you had this whole like rest of the iceberg, which was all the other leads that we just never stopped working, which is all the stuff that, again, traditionally gets left behind because it's not sexy. It doesn't produce dopamine. There's no serotonin involved. It's just boring, you know. It's the work that you're avoiding mostly, but it's also where all the wins come from.
Yeah, it seemed as though, and I know you ended up kind of, as I remember, your total close ratio is around 70%. Is that still an accurate number?
Yeah.
Curious.
68. I won't take it high as 70. Yeah, 68.
I don't want to round up because they're so close to each other. I think most MSPs would dream of a 68% close ratio. So you're still in the sage category as far as I'm concerned. Sure. But how many those 68, to your point, didn't all happen in 90 days?
Right.
Where would you put the close percentage? If what percent of the 68, what percent closed in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Give me your best guess. I know it's probably analysis you never did, but I'm curious as to where the big surges were in terms of close ratio over time.
Yeah. The greatest thing that I kind of figured out to help sort into that so that I knew how to drive the system afterwards was realizing that every first-time appointment, right? Every first-time appointment fit into one of 3 buckets. They were either a buyer or a non-buyer, And if they were a buyer, they were either a buy now or a buy later. And the buy later bucket is the bucket that absolutely gets probably not even acknowledged, let alone it gets forgotten, right? So if I take that approach where it was those three things, 18% of our wins came out of the buy now bucket.
18.
Okay. Yeah, the rest was the buy later bucket. Wow. And so it was all of the other things that we had to put in place. Like it was the guy, the Atomic Habits guy, right? He's the fall. You don't rise to whatever, how great you are. You fall to the level of your systems. That's true. Like it's not easy work. Or maybe it's simple but not easy, right? Like it is the extra email, it's the extra phone call, it's the caring, it's the showing up, it's the consistency, it's that it never falls off the cliff or the end of the follow-up.
Yep.
That's the stuff that created the buy later bucket, right? And then because of all of that is where we figured out, wow, the thing that actually matters the most is messaging and positioning. No one talks about that. But it's the stuff that matters. It's the part that unlocks the psychological pieces that moves a buyer through the 5 emotions they have to go through in order to sign a contract. And again, that's where I kind of tongue-in-cheek equated people to systems earlier, but once I understood the 15 emotions that mattered and which order they needed to happen in, that's where we ended up just having it systematically producing and getting to that 68%. And it was so dialed in that it was truly became the numbers game, right? We started with 1 caller. 7 months in, we went to 2 callers. 6 months after that, we went to 3 callers. We were getting 38 appointments held a month.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, and now you're talking about this whole world where, even if you had no clue what to do, but you had 38 chances in 1 month, right? I don't take lightly the opportunity that I had, right? 38 appointments. Some of the people listening to this show, it might be 5 years worth of leads, right? I had that in 12 months or 1 month, right? Each month. So 3-year agreement. We haven't even told maybe the best or worst part of the story, right? 3-year agreement. That was the progression of the arc. 24 months into a 36-month contract, we broke operations, but broke it to the point where they absolutely couldn't scale, grow, keep up, because they didn't do a lot. We didn't do a lot of the right things along the way to manage the growth as we had it for the first 18 months to be in a position to, even though the projections were there to tell them, hey, this is what we need to be prepared for. Either way, so 24 months in, we stopped cold turkey, right? And that's also why inevitably the relationship ended at the end, was because it took a long time to get that part fixed, the ops side, before they could turn the engine back on. Yep. But yeah, it was just I usually talk about it as a Rubik's Cube, right? You just got to kind of keep tweaking and twisting until you get the colors in the right spot, but everything needs to be a system in the end.
I love that. And I love the if I'm an engineer, I'm an MSP owner, and I'm a logical, structured thinker, it's just a system. It's not magic. This isn't hocus pocus. No. It's logical. Hey, listen, we took care of this problem. We outsourced this function. They've got a consistent track record of producing this input. Now, salesperson needs to focus on turning those into revenue.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. While that's happening daily, someone needs to keep sales or service not only functioning, but also incrementally improving its procedures, processes, controls to keep the ability to execute up. And I think the magic in terms of just exploding would be to somehow, without having private equity money, with there's huge dollar people, for an MSP to say, okay, I have 3 rocks I'm doing. Hey, listen, Jeff, I need you to focus on converting these leads into revenue. Steve, you're running service. I need you to focus on process, procedures, controls to make sure that we are growing operationally as the revenue is growing, so that we don't break ourselves. That's really interesting. I love that, and I think it makes sense for a lot of people, and I wish everyone would take that approach, because it feels like too often we harp on the part that we know the least and that we have the least amount of involvement and confidence in, which in our case is that lead gen part. Every lead that doesn't close is because the lead is bad, and therefore, it's just like, instead of just saying just focus, hire great people, hire Jeff, let him take care of this. Hire Steve, let him take care of that. Like, hold people accountable for doing their part of the machine, and if you do that, everything is going to run in harmony, and that train is going to start moving forward. I love that.
Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier something that really brought kind of two principles out that I remember picking up out of sales as well, and that was when I first started becoming a student of the marketing side. One of two things came out of the same mentor, but one of them was to default to imperfect action, right? Like, get out of your head, stop trying to design perfection, and just default to like, do something. And do it as quickly as you possibly can, because everything changes once you're in motion. And the second part to that was stop stopping. And if you can combine those two ingredients of default to imperfect action and stop stopping, I assure you that you will get to success, whatever your definition of that is. Because the biggest piece, which kind of goes back to that oscillation, right? The biggest problem there is that you're essentially stopping. You're just pivoting and chasing the next dopamine hit, and that's it. And then as soon as like it gets hard and uncomfortable, or you don't want to be accountable for it, you just pick the next shiny object and you chase it for another 3 months. And that was my experience in the MSP world, at least. And so when I was able to instead combine like the discipline, the fortitude, and the conviction to keep going and figure it out, that was the whole stop stopping thing. And that was really where everything just came together and clicked and took off. Because I didn't take lightly the commitment that I made when I signed that agreement with Marketopia. Like, it was Jeffrey Newton's name on the line for more than $250,000 when they didn't even have a GL account to put it in, right? So like, I don't know, that's just me. I take personal responsibility for that, even though it's the company's money. And so like, I wasn't going to fail. I've never failed before in that regard, so I'm not going to do it now. And like, that's a decision and a mindset and an approach where you're like, well, okay, I'm not converting any of the leads they're giving me. I could sit here and I could blame them all I want to. I can chew my success coach up. I could call Terry and tell him whatever I want to tell him, or I can like figure it out. Well, why aren't I? Not everyone is going to not want something, right? And so like, I had to really face the mirror in that regard and be like, okay, like, what is it about me and what I'm doing that's just not working in the situation? And again, it goes back to the Rubik's Cube. Just keep tweaking and adjusting and figuring that piece out. But I came into it with the wrong mindset and wrong attitude. I thought it was the MRR fairy. It was the lead fairy. I still had to do everything else with the lead once I got it. But I wanted the turnkey MRR factory, really. And I had to build that, but I needed the leads to go in.
That's awesome. And Jeff, you achieved extraordinary things. I mean, to break services, I've seen you give multiple podcasts where that was sort of the main message, and I love seeing that, because I think that's cool. I'm so good at what I do that once I first of all I overcame obstacles to success, figured it out, and then I effectively got so good that the team behind me couldn't keep up, and I think that's something that's almost like your grandkids will probably hear that story. That'll become the legend.
It'll be out there in the airwaves somewhere. Yeah. And just to like put some numbers to this for people, right? Because I think sometimes, I don't know, bring the receipts, I guess, right? So in year one, when we first started out, it was $72,000 in net new MRR. And then year two was 84 or 85. I can't remember exactly, because it kind of got dwarfed then. So year two, we improved, right? But year three, 6 months into that, we were already at 86, right? So we were on pace to be where I knew I needed to be, which was going to be up into that, ideally the 150 range. And it just worked. I mean, it didn't just work. We made it work. We created the system that built the momentum. And then, we had to pull the plug at 86 for that year, but everything was there. It was there because of the hard work, the consistency, the endurance, the commitment, like all the things that we're talking about. By no means did I get to just sit there and wait for 38 leads to show up on my door and then sign 38 contracts.
Yeah.
But we were onboarding 4 to 6 customers a month at our peak, right? So, and that was really just like the way in which the snowball had to be built, and then it just produced consistently.
That's interesting. I find it really interesting just hearing you talk about the level of commitment that you had to your piece of that machine. And then somehow, you found commitment either through an internal team or through a third party for the piece of the machine that you needed to make your machine work.
Yeah.
It didn't work, but that didn't matter because you were committed to making it work. So you figured it out.
Yeah.
And then it ended up failing because at the end of the day, the people after you struggled to have the same commitment and discipline and tenacity or whatever you need to figure out their part, because it's not hard to grow.
Yeah.
If you have the processes, systems, controls, if you have all the inputs to get the outputs you're looking for the whole machine, it's just not that complicated. But when any leg of the stool fails, they all fail. Let me ask you a question, because there's a lot of people who are afraid to grow because service is not ready to grow.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that. I'm talking to people I'm like, let me get this straight. You don't want to grow because you don't think you're ready to grow. Yep. I'm like, so you think you're going to have the money and resources to be ready to grow before you have the revenue that comes from that growth. From your perspective, obviously you have even the benefit of hindsight now. Can you fix if every part of the machine had the discipline? Can you build the operation, process, procedures, controls, people while the machine's running? Or are those MSPs right that you actually need to have everything built and perfect and documented and strong before you start to push the gas pedal?
No. Specifically, on ops side, then like process matters. On the sales side, process is garbage, frameworks are the thing.
Okay.
Right? Like you need enough nuance to be able to adapt the goal and the steps and everything else. I'm not saying like just go out and be a maverick. That's not what I'm saying. But process was a banned word on the sales side for me because we followed frameworks, which gave us the fluidity to make it work in a lot more opportunity. On the ops side, you do need process, right? Like you need the maintenance folks to just maintain. Now, to your point about like how do you build the system, solve the system, and fix the system, on a reporting standpoint, right? I had to fix that for predictability as well. So not only did we have the win rate that we had, but because of that, I also had pipeline projection reporting that was 80% accurate at 90 days out. So ops had 90 days at a minimum with 80% accuracy to know what they were going to have to support, right? And we still broke it for a lot of reasons that I dealt with at a lot of MSPs, not just this one. And I think a big piece of it comes down to one thing you mentioned earlier, which is fear of failure. And I saw it all the time, and I had it as well. I have it still in this seat today, but you do it scared anyway. And that sounds cliche, but it is the thing because you default to imperfect action. And so the fear of failure, though, on the ops side is like you get paralyzed because you get stuck in that, here's the 100 reasons why that won't work. And then you rationalize your way into staying comfortable. My goal and my edict, when that was the growth goal that was given to me, was like my role in the organization was to make the organization uncomfortable. Growth is not comfortable, right? Like if you work out, if you walk up the stairs too fast today, you feel it tomorrow. Or you go to the gym, like all those things, you feel the muscle tension and the soreness. Like you have to rip it and break it for it to grow. That's how that works. So like that was my role. That was my responsibility, was to force a level of discomfort within the org that they had to level up behind the sales. I used to call it the tip of the spear, right? Nothing happens until the contract is signed. Nothing happens. Another way we would say it is like, what is it? Revenue solves pretty much everything else, but it's just like the numbers had to be there. And when they were, we had the resources, to your point, or we had the time, or we had the flexibility, or we had any of those things. But without it, do you build Rome before anyone shows up at all? No, you don't do it that way either. So to me, that's why sales was the tip of the spear. We led and we pushed by producing the revenue, and then we constantly made sure that ops was uncomfortable. It had capacity, but it was uncomfortable the whole time. It was never standing still.
One thing I've followed you in your career, and today I really appreciate you giving me an understanding of just where it started. It feels like you have multiple chapters to your career. And as you were closing that MSP chapter, I was blessed to be a part of that and see you give back and share some of the wisdom that you had gained for 20 years in the space in every different role, so you can kind of have a perspective that most people don't have. When you start off as a consumer grade tech at Best Buy and you end up with a 70% close ratio salesperson, you've learned a lot in those periods. Jeff, I know you've kind of graduated out of the MSP world and went into the vendor world. How has your knowledge and experience over those 20 years in the MSP world parlayed into your success, or maybe not so, and what you're doing today? Tell us about where you are right now, what you're doing, and how it's related, how you've benefited from your experience.
Yeah, I think more than anything, there's no substitute for lived experience, right? Shared experience is one thing, where I can tell you what I did or like didn't do or any of that, but lived experience is just there's no substitute for that. On the vendor side, it's shocking and alarming how many, whether it's companies, whether it's founders, whether it's products, whether whatever, like they haven't actually lived the experience of their ICP or the person that they're solving for, right? They have been around it, maybe. We call ourselves the channel, so we feel like we're a part of it. But like, did you sit in that seat? Did you sit in all 11 of those titles and those roles when stupid decisions were being made because best practices told them to make them that way? And like, you have to live and feel it's palpable, right? When you're in it and you live it. Like now being a vendor, being able to direct and lean into and influence and impact immediately the why and how we do what we do, because I know exactly down to the atomic step how it impacts and influences the person in that seat, the human, not the role and not the title and not the responsibility, but the human. There is nothing more rewarding now than to leverage, 18 years of sitting in those seats to be like, I know exactly why and how we should meet this person where they are to do it. And so that's like maybe the backdrop for how it's more of a catalyst, a plateau to jump from versus like abandoning it and starting over. And then the other side to that is, from a vendor standpoint, like your biggest challenge is product market fit, right? Which also ties straight back into that. Like when you intimately know the pain, and also like anyone that's listening and doesn't know me has probably picked up on this. I'm pretty like contrarian. I don't like to be boxed in. I don't really prefer authority all that much, but I'm also trying to figure it out all the time. And so like bucking the system, if you will, and like thinking about things completely differently and bringing a unique approach to solving something that the whole industry has just accepted as good enough for as long as I was in it, is like, well, what if there was a different reality? What if it didn't have to be the way that it's always been? And like, how do we impact and change and influence that? Well, you do that by going, ironically enough, back to one of the core values of one of the first MSPs I was at, which was be the change you seek. It's like, okay, well, the only way to make it different is to go make it different, not to complain about it and not to like, preach about it or chastise it or pretend that I know what I'm doing. It's just like, well, go do it. Go create the reality that we want. And so after those 18 years, surprisingly, it's actually a piece of the Marketopia story, really. So we had stopped selling, right? We pulled the plug, took about 6 months off, and then got operations fixed. We were ready to rebuild the engine. So naturally, after 6 months, like the tools and the market and everything sort of changed. I needed to rebuild the sales system, starting from scratch, but whatever. So I went out to the market to try to figure out, okay, what tools are available? Like what's changed in the market in the last 6 months? What's out there now? And I saw a LinkedIn post, which I'm never on social media at all, but I happened to be on LinkedIn one day, or I got like a notification to my phone. Jesse Miller had posted about, hey, anyone that's looking for voice to CRM, I want to do a user interview with a vendor that I'm aware of or whatever. I'm like, voice to CRM sounds cool. I'm rebuilding my sales team. You mean I don't have to update HubSpot on my own or whatever? Like that was the thought. As soon as I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It was exactly as advertised. Like, hey, update that deal for Marketopia from Q1 to Q3. It needs to be at 78 grand instead of 72. I met with Terry. Make sure that I tell him, let's go fishing the next time I'm in town. And it just went into ConnectWise. I'm like, okay.
That's cool.
What these guys had thought of and built, which are now my co-founders, but what they built was that. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is brilliant. But if you want to sell it to MSPs, we've got to solve it for the service side of the house, right? Because of the ratio. There's 10 techs to one owner who is the salesperson versus anything else. I'm like, can you do that for tickets? Can you do that for QBRs? Can you do that for meetings? Can you do that for all of the service side of the house? And 3 weeks later, they called me back. They showed me the demo of at that time our MVP. And, hey, create a ticket on the managed service board for Terry's printer. He needs to cut paychecks before noon, and there's an issue. Boom, and it's in ConnectWise, right? Like,
Wow.
okay, so now here's a whole new world of natural language to the PSA, and we never look back from there. So instead of rebuilding the sales team, they loved my approach and my attitude and sort of the chip on my shoulder towards the way that things were from vendors. And, a couple months later, they offered me a co-founder slot. So I jumped and have been building this since.
Awesome, dude. And how's it going so far, man? Success, has success found you? And I'm curious, what have you learned in terms of your sales methodology, in terms of how it applies for MSPs?
Yeah, a lot of it's still the same. Messaging and positioning matter more than marketing and more than sales. It ties straight into psychology. It helps that I am my ICP, so I can just have a peer-to-peer conversation with people. That's a great thing. I've never sold something that's so easy to sell. It's not even selling. It's just showing them, hey, this problem that you know you've dealt with forever doesn't have to be a problem anymore. And so that part is, I'm so fortunate to be able to live in that situation. So like kind of fast forwarding, maybe the short version of the last year and a half is we had an MVP, had about 100 users, about 30 MSPs, built that up, got a bunch of attention, raised $5 million in our seed round at the beginning of this year, went out and recruited and hired some brilliant talent to take the idea and then build it as enterprise software instead of just the MVP. And then we, plowed forward this year and are just releasing that right now. Actually, I'm in the middle of the product launch right now, the enterprise product launch of it. Not enterprises, and it's only available to enterprise people, but the production grade version of what we're selling is now available. And it's just such a blast, right? Like to have completely eliminated the stress, the anxiety, the cognitive load of documentation, ticket notes, time entry, like an MSP that never has to, slam the door and demand timesheets be submitted by 10 a.m. every morning. Like it's one, that part goes away, but two, the quality of life for the human in the seats can actually focus on the parts they want to do, which is help the people. So it's great.
I want to grasp onto that last statement and use that to bring us home. Jeff, you're a pleasure to talk to. You're a pleasure to learn from. You're a pleasure to work with. And I just want you to know, as a Peanut Gallery member, keep doing what you do. Keep trying to help people. Keep trying to pay it forward and to partake and to contribute and just make a difference in the community. Because I feel like whatever conversation I've either witnessed or been a part of, your passion is about making a difference and helping someone. And I wanted to applaud you for that. I wanted to celebrate that. And I wanted to encourage you to continue finding that platform to do that. It's an honor to talk to you here. It's an honor to invite you to come to the Marketopia office any day you want, whether clients are here or not, because I think everyone can learn from you. You have a fresh perspective on things. You have a lot of wisdom. And if you shaved your beard a little bit tighter, you might look like Jimmy Neutron, boy genius, because that's what I think you are, dude. I appreciate you, and I celebrate you, man.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terry. Always happy to help.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, you as well.
All right, man. See ya.